When I talk to new users about Dundas BI, there's a very common question that we get asked when it comes to data, and that is, can we connect to blank? Now, I usually imagine this interaction between myself and the person of interest going something like this.
I'm worried about blank.
Don't you worry about blank. Let me worry about blank.
Good. I also would have accepted blank. Blank? You're not looking at the big picture.
Now, whatever blank is, the odds are that you are going to be able to connect to it using Dundas BI. Dundas BI is a very open piece of software with numerous data connectors provided out of the box to nearly every big name provider. And sometimes, though, data is not provided through something like a common interface, and you do need to do a bit of work to make a connection. A good example of one of these sources is actually Salesforce. Salesforce lets you connect and use their data through an API programmatically. Now, luckily for you, if you wanted to use Salesforce with Dundas BI, you don't have to code to do it. Salesforce is such a popular platform that everybody wants to do it, so products like Dundas will have a built-in data connector that kind of wraps that API for you, so you don't really see it. It just gives you data. But what happens if you want to use something that is a little less common than Salesforce? Right? There's a lot of applications out there, more than you could ever list. So this is where Python code comes into play. Python will allow you to connect to any data source programmatically and return data. So let's look at a live example of connecting to a third-party system using Python code in Dundas BI. I'm Jeff, and this is Off the Charts with Jeff. Before we get into this, I just want to make sure that everyone is clear on something. Coding, like I'm about to do to make a data connection, is usually your last resort. It's a great option to have, but make sure that there isn't an easier way first. Most data sources will provide mechanisms to make data connections through common mechanisms like an ODBC driver or direct database access. And we do recommend that you first talk to whoever your data provider is and ask them how they want a third-party vendor to connect to their data. If the answer is API, great, we can talk. But if there's something else first, do that first. It's easier than writing code. So just make sure this isn't your first try. The data source that I'm going to connect to today is called Harvest, which is a modern time tracking software that our services team uses internally to help manage our consulting projects, things like tasks and time management. Harvest does a great job documenting their entire API, which I very much appreciate. They even offer a GitHub example on how to connect to their data using Python. That might be helpful. So there's a lot of documentation out there for most of these people from the vendor themselves who are providing the data. So definitely find that first. Within the Harvest application, you can see that I've gone and created a project. And if I scroll down, I have some tasks and fictional times for each of these. So what I'm going to do is write some code that will allow me to pull this information into Dundas BI live. So what I'm going to do is actually go into a development environment, in this case, VS Code. I do recommend that you first write the script outside of Dundas BI. Dundas BI isn't a development environment. It allows you to bring in those scripts, but if you can develop it outside, you have a lot more tools for debugging and just general help, watch variables, things like that, to help you make sure that the code's going to work in the first place. By the way, if you do want to get into this and you don't have something like VS Code running, I actually ran into a wonderful guide online by a third party. I can probably dig it up if someone's interested, so do drop me an email. The email is provided at the end of this video. If you'd like that, I'll go find it. Now, in VS Code, I created a script. This script is used to pull information about a given project. Let me walk you through what's going on here. So I start by importing some useful libraries to allow for data retrieval and pandas for data formatting. Here, I created a function that returns the data from the Harvest API. So this function starts by building the correct URL based on our project ID. And by the way, the project ID is something that I was easily able to find right from the Harvest interface. You can see it right here. So what I'm doing as I call this function is simply feeding this project ID into it so that it builds the URL and returns data from my project. Then we make a web request, pass our security information, and we've got data. From here, I do refine it a little bit. I'm going to trim it down and specifically pull out something that they call time entities, which is exactly what I wanted from the data. Now you can see if we run this in VS Code that I am able to preview that data, and now the script's ready to bring into Dundas BI. In Dundas BI, we just create a data cube and add a Python data generator node. This node allows us to run any Python code that we want. So let's just pass this code in. And for testing, you may have recalled that I had a print statement at the bottom where the output would be dumped into the console in VS Code. In Dundas BI, we want to change this to a return because that's the data we're returning to the application. That's it. Now you can see that we can run this and we are able to get data out of it pretty quickly. From here, a user could really easily go over to a dashboard and start dragging and dropping and creating whatever they want from it. So really cool stuff. So I hope you like it, and having this capability really allows you to connect to pretty much any data source. The other benefit of this is if you want to hand this over to a non-technical user to give them access to data, that way they don't have to write the code, but they can still have that drag and drop capability for it, and the technical part is completely abstracted for them. So it's really helpful from a data governance standpoint. If Python is something that you're interested in, I did a video recently called Introduction to Python in Dundas BI. In this video, I created a system where we can pull in currency information live. So check it out if you haven't had a chance. That's all for now, and thanks for watching.